and get answers on those 3 questions. And I hope that you will also share some of your experiences, because in this room we have a wealth of experience and knowledge, even though not everybody's a speaker, but everybody has got a lot to contribute. And I appreciate that as well. All right, let's get on to the questions. The roving mic is there. Yes, ma'am. I have noted you, but because you asked a question in the last round, I will give somebody else a chance. Yes, sir. Number 2. And last one. Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Let's go, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Connie Mutsumi from the Premier Soccer League. The question is directed to Bonang, and it's more around, I think, Bonang, we need to confirm that we are influencers as professionals and not the clever blacks. But we are influencers, and I think the questions that you've, the tone that you've set with regards to the leadership, the direction, the global trends that we all know of. What are the questions that we are asking as professionals, firstly to government? Because I think it is our role to influence government, and having followed your career growth and your path from Sanlam, Otis, whatever, BMF. So I think for me, these are the questions that we should be asking and saying, what are we doing? Firstly, as a networking platform, but also as a influencing role, because in fact, Dudu and I have a similar background in terms of influencing people. That's really what we do. So you influence so that you can get a different change and the country becomes better. So for me, it's just a question, what are we doing? When do we do it? Our jobs are seen as just networkers, schmoozers, parties, the right telephone numbers on your phone book, but it's not about that. It is about the country that I think 20 years from now, when you look at the numbers that you've just mentioned, it's quite a scary thought. So that's just my question.
Thank you very much, ma'am. You, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. It's Shadrach Moipudi from the Cultural Research Council. Thank you to the presenters. I think they've done a wonderful job. I just wanted to raise a question to the panel, and thanks, Bonang, for the analysis that you brought in. And I'm trying to link it with the issues around networking. There's a picture I saw a few years ago of this club that's called the Brick in those days, before it became BRICS. And in that picture, the 4 people that belonged to that club had got together and they were shaking hands at the end of their meeting. And that meeting was convened primarily to make a decision about what to do with a currency that was not theirs, which is the dollar. And today, that brick, and maybe the S now, and I'll add it as a small s, appears to be now changing the balance of, of power in terms of who has the cash. What does it now mean for us? Because you've also indicated that we are punching above our weight. We decided to join that club because we believe it's a very good networking opportunity. To what extent can we take lessons out of that and say, if we form ourselves into the appropriate kind of strategic networks, we will be able to achieve what we want?
Thank you, sir. Third question.
Hello, my name is Jabu from Media Savvy. I'd like to say hello to the panel and everybody here. Basically, my question is, I'd like to probably collect from, just draw on the collective wisdom of the panel and perhaps other people here that can answer the question. I'd like to just ask an overall question, that how do we, as the country, how do we chart the way forward in terms of looking outwardly for growth, instead of, right now we have in-groups that are fighting, each other, and then we use race, and then we, and other people do not have market opportunities and so forth. So we have internal squabbles that we are relentlessly debating and focused on, and we don't seem to be looking outward and like for instance, looking into China and looking into other countries and exporting our own products and competing against them, and in that way getting a bigger pie of the economic market, you know what I mean, so that we at least have a bit more of that pie. But right now it seems like I want to take what John has in South Africa because, well, I'm a BE candidate, I should have also got it. But John is also, his pie is also shrinking, and somehow we don't seem to be looking outward, and that's how I'd like to kind of frame my question, if I hope that's understandable.
Yeah, I think we got it. Thank you so much. And I think, Cynthia, maybe you can take the question around, and the other panelists are free to weigh in as well, the question around networking and how we can relate that to influencing people. And Lerato, if you could maybe take the last question about how we can look outward for growth beyond ourselves. And as I said, the other panelists are free to weigh in on that. And Bonang, the BRIC question that came through from that gentleman, and any of the other questions that you'd like to comment on. First question.
Yes.
I'm going to offer an apology now because I've got a bit of a gruff voice at the moment, which is not perfect timing, but at least it's the tail end of a touch of flu. In terms of networking, and if we add ethics to that, I'd almost like to bring the day's conversation together around saying we're talking about branding, we're talking about networking. And clearly, if one has got a clear, consistent brand, that's obviously optimal in terms of networking. But for me, the influence really comes in what happens when we add ethics to that mix. And I think it poses two very important ethical questions of what is the ethical cost of networking? Is there a downside, as the title of today suggested, and there is? And also, what is the cost for a brand of an ethical failure? And those for me are really key questions. I'm putting it back to you. Much like Donna can talk about this for a long time, but it's probably not a good idea. But I really think that excluding ethics from this misses what should be a fundamental feature of both of these issues.
All right, and before you get on to the next question, I just want to mention that Cynthia's got a book that's called Ethics, Giving a Damn, Making a Difference, and I can vouch for her. She is somebody that does give a damn about ethics. So feel free to question her extensively on that issue. Yes?
Repeating your question.
The question was about how we can go beyond what we are currently doing as a country, where we are looking inward, we are therefore fighting for little bits and pieces, when in fact growth is outside. We should be looking towards China and other countries. And if you feel that this is not your strong point, we can ask somebody else to respond to that question.
I sort of feel like it's a very broad question. I don't know, do you want to maybe start?
Handle the others. Handle the others.
Comment on any of the questions that have been asked.
I'd rather, can I request that, can you focus on the legal part in terms of the conflict of interest issues when we come to networking? Because I think part of the media has been showing us how vulnerable we are. So if you can enlighten, because not all of us are lawyers, and not all of us read our Companies Act and Degree and stuff like that. So based on the discussions that have occurred, just a few points in terms of this is what we should be careful of.
Okay. So maybe I'll touch on the looking outward question, but I think that for me is very interesting. And I love that Cynthia is here, because I do think conflicts of interest aren't very regulated. They aren't very legislated. And I think the reason is that human behavior is very hard to legislate. And it becomes, it sort of sits in that place, that gray space between ethics and morality and perception. And the law comes in as a tool to shape people's behavior. But I think the dearth of legislation speaks exactly to how hard that is. So for instance, you'll find for instance, the Electoral Commission Act has a section on conflicts of interest. The sort of large, the companies that are set up by legislation, for instance, will probably have it. The Companies Act has a section. But to give you an example, it's literally out of 100 and something, 200 and something sections, there's 2 sections in the Companies Act that deal with conflicts of interest. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to understanding what duties you have and how you manage that. And the law at the moment really just says, okay, if you find yourself in this situation, understand that you could have a conflict of interest. Understand that it could be a potential conflict of interest, it could be a perceived conflict of interest, it could be an actual conflict of interest. What do you do about it? And it gives you tools around that. But I don't know if I've answered that. Or
What are the tools?
the tools, okay, so for instance, I think the Companies Act is probably the simplest, but like I say, there's different legislation that adds on this. And then what you find a lot is that companies, especially larger companies, will have sort of code of ethics, which I think they sort of try to shape the story towards their industry or their market, or the types of people that they employ, the types of relationships they have. But in terms of the Companies Act, it will be an understanding, like I said, of your duties and your responsibilities, and then an understanding of, without putting it in so many words, how conflicts can come up. So the idea that you can have a conflict, a potential of a conflict at any time, and there's a provision that allows, that speaks to the ability of a Dudu to disclose information that she may have, a relationship she may have at any given time. It also speaks to actual conflicts where Dudu is actually in a position and a matter has come up before, usually a board, because it's very hard to regulate shareholders as well, because their duty is really just to maximize their profits. But as a director, you have duties beyond that. You have fiduciary duties, you have duties of care, and actually requires that you disclose. And so one of the tools is disclosure. Another tool is recusal, where you actually remove yourself. And then another tool, which I don't know that the Companies Act, there's a provision in Section 75 that speaks to this, but in sort of vague terms. But what it's saying is the board has a responsibility as well to manage conflicts as they come up. So as a director, you have personal responsibilities, and it's your responsibility to know when you need to say certain things and when you need to remove yourself, and when a relationship you may have may create a conflict, being either a personal financial interest that you have or someone related to you. But the board also, as a group of individuals with those fiduciary duties, also has a responsibility to the organization that they're a board of.
And Donata, perhaps you can just tell us, is it enough to disclose and to perhaps say, there is a potential for a conflict of interest here, and to mitigate, I am not going to sit in on any committees that could grant business to this entity because I'm somehow involved? Would that be enough, or do you, as a leader in an organization, need to do more and perhaps say, I'm going to not only deal with the potential for a conflict, but also the perception. So let's not even do business with this company because it could create an impression that something untoward has happened.
No, and that's exactly what's so interesting to me about this area, because the law can't regulate every conversation we have and every interaction we have amongst individuals. But we all have a sense of what's ethical, and we have a sense of what's right. And that's where sort of Cynthia's side comes in. And I think recent examples, the Luminance example, for instance, which I'm certainly more familiar with than the more recent IC one, it shows us that you can sometimes do everything by the book. You can disclose, whatever might have needed to be disclosed. We've seen Opilisile Buthelezi Mthethwa defending themselves that, but I don't have this relationship. Had they had that relationship, it would have been perfectly fine to just say, this is my sister, this is we're shareholders in a company together. In terms of the law, that would have been enough as a first step. If that particular individual was then sitting in on a decision as to award certain money, it may have been enough for them to recuse themselves. But the power of an apparent, a perceived conflict is so strong that sometimes you really do need to go beyond what the law allows you. And I think that's where it becomes a very individual judgment call, and that's where it becomes interesting and a little bit more dangerous, because you can't just rely on the law, unfortunately. You really have to come with your whole self. And I think it was Lebu who was talking about being present, you know, as part of your brand. And I think this is part of it, that you can't sort of check boxes in this area. You have to be very present as to what promises you've made and what expectations people have of you, and meet those in your behavior. Whether it's you know, 10 kilometers on this side of the law or a centimeter on the other side.
So always be aware of the court of public opinion.
Precisely.
It is there. Right, thank you so much. Muna?
Yeah, Connie asked an interesting question about our role as influencers and what questions are we going to ask government. I think some of the questions that we really need to be asking broadly, I would say, I think we need to continue to speak truth to power. Because governments everywhere else in the world, and our government is no different, they need to get it in themselves that they work for us as the general electorate. I think some of these rituals that we have when we're in a hall, politicians walk in, and we feel compelled to stand up and give them a standing ovation, even if they've said nothing. As if they're special from us. You know, politicians can't take trains and commercial planes, and you find yourself sitting next to one. They somehow need a private jet and a different entrance. And when we happen to be in the plane together, as we walk through that birth canal, they must be whisked away somewhere else and be taken in a private car. It's something that's uniquely African. That when you move from the airport, you know, to wherever you want to go in a meeting, you must have 3 cars in front of you and then 3 cars behind you with sirens blazing. Why can't you be normal and travel from the airport to wherever you're going without the world knowing? You know, I think we need to be asking those questions, but bigger questions that says, especially as black people, that why is it that when government wants to talk politics, they go to black business? But when they want to talk business, they go to white business. That this government is going to rise or fall not so much on the quantum of the resources that we have, because I think we have got money coming out of our ears. It's just that we are a wasteful society. So Terence Nombembe tells us now, and in the last 3 consecutive years, that only 5% of municipalities have clean audits. So the conversation we're having with government is that organizations that we represent, like the Black Business Council, BMF, and ABASA, the Association of Black Accountants, have on the one hand young black graduates. All they want is to serve articles. Let's ensure that every single solitary one of these 287 municipalities have at least one of these students who can sit on their audit committees, so that we give effect to our fiduciary responsibilities, that we understand the issues of stewardship and probity, that we can exercise our duty of care, skill, and diligence. Then we combine it with the ethical issues that for us conflicts of interest means that it should be possible to do business without bribing, stealing, or cheating. That the biggest challenge any organization faces today is competition commission, or the lack thereof. And I think the construction industry is a good example. And I think the competition commission legislation is very simple. It says, don't do anything that even smells of market allocation, collusion, or price fixing. So, you know, it is possible to do business cleanly. We should be saying to our young brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, that hard work must be rewarded and recognized, palleted, highlighted, and celebrated. There is no job anywhere called Shama 10. A job is making products or providing services, not just structuring and deal structuring. That's what drives really an economy. Our biggest problem that keeps you and I awake at night is these high levels of unemployment, which then lead to poverty and inequality. I was talking about Terence Nombembe, tells us that we are wasteful. So he says in the last 3 years, 36 months, we have burned in the order of 105 billion rands in irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So we burn at 25 billion a year every year. If we stopped only the bleeding, we could pay for the e-tolls cash in 12 months. It doesn't have to take to last us that long. So I think if anything, we should be holding our politicians' feet to the fire. Yeah. This is our money. We are the bosses. Can you imagine the CEO going to the board and say, no, I'll tell you when to stand, when to clap. The board rules, they lead the board. The CEO leads the enterprise. Here we have it the other way around. We elect the politicians. A guy from an informal settlement area on Monday. On Wednesday, the same guy you've just elected comes in a mag, and as he walks by you, instead of saying, we've put you there to do some work, make sure that the garbage gets collected and that the streets are cleaned. So I think there's a piece of work, and all of it, it's about economic growth. You see, this thing called affirmative action, black economic empowerment, transformation in general, it's really about growing the size of the cake, not redistributing poverty. Thank you.
That's the problem with these clever blacks. They always speak truth to power. We're watching you. I think, ladies and gentlemen, let's take just one more round of questions, unless there's something absolutely burning. And we will take, if there aren't any new faces that have not asked questions, we'll take you, ma'am, and you. And Dudu can abuse the platform. One more time. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is Mabatu again from Marsh, and my question is directed towards Ndate Mohale, and it speaks to the roles that you play both in your corporate life and also in the associations that you represent. I mean, you have a very influential role at Shell, and you have quite a high position in the BMF, and those are both respectable positions. But the BMF is a great networking platform. You get to meet people, you get to socialize, and you get to expand your network as well. And I'm very interested to find out how it is you manage to avoid things, especially within the BMF, such as insider trading, conflict of interest, where today you guys are playing golf together and you are laughing and you're at each other's houses. The following day you have to make a decision as to whether you will partner up with that person or not. How do you strike that balance between the two? And how is it that you avoid being in a situation where you could be accused of either one of the two, or possibly anything else that would speak to anything that's not ethical?
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, it's Millicent from Shell. I thought it would really be befitting that I stand up and talk in front of this house that we are eternally grateful that we have Bonang Mohale as chairman. He says I must sit down, but today I'm not going to do it, so if you can just allow me the space, please. Yeah, so I thought I should just say that I think we work for Shell mostly because we identify with your vision, and I'm not buying your face today. I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart, that I'm really grateful that I work under your leadership. The question that I wanted to pose to you today is that you were part of the business leaders that took a stance in the run-up to Mangaung last year, really saying this is what business's vision on South Africa. We saw that at that run-up, but since then, I think you guys have been rather quiet on really taking a meaningful stand-up against government, or the policies, if I can put it that way. So I just really wanted to know, what is the way forward? Are you backing off because there's pressures on the government side, or are you going to spearhead and move the way forward in staying a meaningful force to reckon with? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question, Dudu.
Thank you. From my side, just the topic, because for me it's very critical in terms of our generation, the next generation, board positions, executive positions, leadership in general. Who you know, is it more important than what you know, based on the culture that we have created in this country, based on the fact that if you are black, you are the key to government. I would like us to have a very clear answer to that.
Thank you very much. Bona, it seems as though you are in the firing line a lot.
Yes, Millicent, thank you for embarrassing me. I love you with all my heart. We wouldn't do these amazing, wonderful things at Shell without your very active participation. So let me start with who or what you know. So I really wanted to be less explicit, that in business, it's really about what you know, not who you know. Because if you depend only on who you know, it cannot be sustainable. And I will combine it with a question that Mabatu raised. Because the only thing that we genuinely own is our integrity, nothing else. And we have been brought up by women, and I was brought up by my grandmother. And my grandmother, for me, used to say, intense work is rest. So we saw value in hard work. And if you work hard, that's where the value comes from. You add value, you'll probably look for a job once in your life. The other companies will be asking you to come and help them to do the type of things that you did because of your demonstrable track record. If it is only about your political connections, imagine if you were the friend of Dinapule, you'll be out in the cold by now. Of course, you'll be having 6 million in your bag, but 6 million after some time, it gets finished. It's one X5 and one house in Leondale or in Crystal Park, and it doesn't pay you rates and taxes. The reason why some of us have survived at this highest policy and decision-making level since the 17th of April 1984 is precisely because every in full on budget and on time, you will be fired. There are no conversations. So I wear a hat as the chairman of Shell and the group CEO of Shell, where I fire and hire. It's how I look at this power that I have and say, is it going to be power for the self or power for greater good? And where I come from my grandmother, I have really internalized the fact that power is what men like, because like a ski boat, when you turn the throttle, it's a V8 or V10, you can feel the power. But rather be obsessed with energy, because a ski boat by definition has a 3-kilometer radius. So if you get power drunk in the middle of the ocean and you get out of the 3-kilometer zone, you'll come back pushing it. Whereas a sailboat, it doesn't make which men like, and it turns us on. But it's about harnessing the skill, the force, the impetus of the wind. And if you get it right, you can circumnavigate the world not once, but 8 times. So it's the judicious use of power for the greater good. So when you sleep at night, to say, as a temporary holder of this corridor of power, what have you done to improve the quality of lives of the majority of people? Because leadership is actually being obsessed with the development of others. You go out of your way looking at your people, you want to catch them doing the right thing so that you can palette, highlight, and celebrate that. So that's what I do at Shell, and I do it very well. Otherwise, I would not have survived as a manager since 1984. At the BMF, this is where we pay our school fees. So when we are tired from Shell, in that evening, we go and meet and engage, interact, and interface, and talk about how we are going to change the socio-economic environments which have excluded individuals from previously disadvantaged groups. So I'm called the president of the BMF because we are obsessed with 2 things and 2 things only. The development of managerial capacity so that we can help Terence Nombembe to deliver clean audits, so that we can have managers that are black but understand and have an appreciation of corporate governance. They can sit on boards and really add value, that they can navigate through a board pack, they know what to do in the first board meeting, and I can give them my networks. And Dudu says, but I want to talk to Saki and say, don't worry, here is private cell number. When she turns that way, I call Saki and say, I've just given your name to Dudu, do take the call when she calls. That's what counseling, coaching, and holding by the hand is. So we are about the accelerated development of previously disadvantaged individuals, so that it doesn't take them 20 years to become CEOs that it took us. It takes them 13. But it can only happen because they work harder, we share with them what we know, and we synergize with the little that we have. And we are guided by only 3 values: honesty, integrity, and respect. So that even if I catch you stealing from me right-handed, I still fire you on Wednesday, but you have a sense that you hit respect.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our panelists. And do a word of thanks for the panelists, and also if you can just give a word of thanks to everybody here. And just as she prepares to do that, Bonang, I must just tell you, you spoke a little bit about the legacy that you have left behind and are continuing to live out at Shell. I heard somewhere that they say the worst way to die is to die reading Life magazine. I say that is not true. The worst way to die is to die having left no legacy at all.
That's profound.
Life magazine, yes, we hear that, but the legacy issue is very important. So thank you so much for having set the example, set the tone of what it is to lead. Thank you, Cynthia, so much. Talking about ethics, I love how committed you are to talking about something that most people don't want to talk about. They don't want to commit to an ethical lifestyle in the workplace. But you have championed that cause for many, many years. And you keep doing that, and strength to you as you keep going forward. Lerato, thank you so much for your invaluable insights, particularly on the issue of law. We know that there are a lot of gray areas, but you have managed today to give some insight so that we can, going forward, as we take on positions of leadership further down the line, bear that in mind as well. So thank you to you.
Oh. Well, it's affirmative action first. So it's the welfare. Affirms the man. Mr. Mohale. I have moments, you know that. Since I met you at our home at BMF, yeah, you kind of continue to amaze me. Your accessibility, your love for your wife. It's consistent, Susan, yes. And the love of the country. Your passion oozes, you energize, you never fail. And whenever I send a message, without fail, you respond. I will never take that for granted. Thank you so much. And you do embarrass me.
Thank you so much. Putbonang, you've spoken volumes. And so if you've got ears, you heard. This is something from Sanlam, just to, they always think that people coming from the humanities, they don't listen, and we do listen. And there's something you said, the 2 things I want to highlight from what you said. You mentioned something about the shift from the west to the east, and that got me bothered. Because I'm just thinking, we need to do something, because a lot of people think that English is knowledge. So we've mastered the language, we speak it very well. Now that shift from the west to the east says that you've got to learn another language. Because now you've got to start to learn the Mandarin language. You've got to start to think about where the opportunities are going to come from. If you've got people in your organization, you've got to think about whether you are geared for the businesses and the opportunities of the future. If you have got children that you have thought that they need to go to the UK or somewhere else for education, you need to start to think. And if they're busy choosing an optional language like they do, they've got a chance to do 3 languages, you've got to start influencing them because you know where the trend is actually going. So if you're a parent, you've got a responsibility. If you're a company person, you've got to start thinking about whether you are geared for the future. That is that. The last one that's really, really giving me palpitations as we speak is the one now on these demographics as well and the shifts. Because I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, my goodness, I've migrated at some stage of my life from I come from Mpumalanga, then I landed up here in Gauteng, then I went down to the Western Cape, and then I came back to Gauteng. Now, does it mean that I've got to move up to the other countries? And my biggest fear, you know, I was one of those fortunate people that come from a rural area. So when you come from a rural, you barely live in a shack. And I'm really thinking, because in those places they've got those wooden homes. I don't know whether they call it, whatever they can call them, bungalows or anything. Anything that's not made out of brick and mortar. And I'm sitting thinking, yo, Spew, how can in my old age, so I'm really getting worried, but again, I'm hoping that I can get my daughters to be the one that migrate. I will stay in Zofana, Noshingi, I'll stay behind and just, you know, make sure that I don't kick too much when the shark, you know, is kind of biting. Thank you.
Cynthia. Oh, I'm so sad that your voice was not participating today. But we have experienced your wisdom, because in our seminar last year, you kind of knocked it out of the ballpark, so we know what you're capable of. Since I've met you, you've kind of been a supporter, and you keep me top of mind, I keep you top of mind, and that's what it's about. And thank you for the confidence you always have in me, and whenever I call, and thank you for answering. Thank you. Ma'am, I do apologize. I really wanted the legal part to form a huge part of it. But when the morning didn't turn out the way we had hoped, thank you for staying on. But I just hope, because for me it's very important. I don't think everybody's as passionate about corporate governance as I am. I was introduced to it in 1998, and I've been hooked ever since. So it's something that people think it's just for the board. For me, governance is an attitude you bring to life. The issues change, and the responsibilities change, but the principles are the same. And I just wish everybody across every discipline will get into it, and this is the role I wanted you to play. But we shall revisit that role, and thank you again. When I called, you just said yes. Thank you.